Hi, Anil. Thank you so much for inviting me to share my thoughts on your channel. Very, very grateful that you give me this opportunity. For those of you who are listening in from around the world and taking your time to be with Anil and myself today, thank you for doing that. We appreciate you taking this time because we are all busy. So let me start a little bit by introducing myself. So my name is Ravi. I run my own future of work coaching and CXO practice. My purpose of doing this is to bring insight and expertise to individuals and organizations to help them capitalize on the opportunities that these interesting times are presenting to us. I have over 2 decades of industry experience, both in multinational companies as well as private equity-backed companies. I started as a management trainee, and I worked my way up to the global head of talent and capability. Most of my portfolio of work is around transformation. And this includes resetting cultures and mindset, changing leadership styles and leadership portfolio, developing and setting up a global talent academy, mergers and acquisitions work, and in the recent time, a lot more on coaching, capability, upskilling, organization design, and digital transformation. So I'm quite excited when Anil actually reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be able to come in and speak a little bit about your experiences?" And I said, "That would be an honor, and it's a great pleasure." It also is quite interesting because I worked in a number of industries like technology, professional services, real estate, manufacturing, and I've lived in India, Singapore, London, Frankfurt, and Chicago. I'm currently based out of Singapore. So I'm going to talk today to you about 2 things. One is the context in which we are operating. And secondly, what does that context mean and what can we do as CXOs and as individuals? So that's really what the brief that Anil gave me, and I think it's a very, very topical thing to talk about. So I would do that in the next about 20 minutes or so, and then we can connect afterwards. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the context of what we all have been going through in the last 12 months or so. I'd like to contextualize this at a macro level so you see what that looks like and what some of the implications are. And some of it might be repetition, so I'd probably try and go through it relatively at a quick pace. But some of it might be interesting and you may not have picked it up. So one, starting from early this year, there was significant disruption to all the economies and livelihoods across the world. COVID has really thrown a spanner in the works. And the World Health Organization estimates that nearly half of the world's 3.3 billion people who are part of the workforce is at risk or have already lost their jobs. And this is quite significant. So at a base of it all, it's not just a health emergency, it's also a humanitarian crisis. Many companies and individuals and countries are dealing with severe restrictions. We've never seen that, at least in my lifetime, I've never seen it. Things like lockdowns, health scares, family emergencies, social distancing, and on the business side, severe drop in revenues and supply chain disruptions. And this is something that is all new for many of us. It's estimated that on an average, we can expect that just supply chain disruptions itself will cause an impact of about 40% of the earnings of a company. And that's quite significant, as you can imagine. Before we started COVID, I think it was always quite interesting to watch the automation and augmentation space because there was always this thing around, hey, we are going to automate a lot of the work. There's a lot of AI coming in. There's a lot of automation coming in. But now putting COVID on top of it has really caused a lot more disruption to that. And this can be quite a big thing. Out of the total amount of jobs that were anyway going to be automated, we are adding another one third or at least even half of those more because of COVID. So that's a displacement of quite a significant piece of the global workforce. Um, and this, all of this, when you put together in context of the person, of an individual like ourselves, who's working within the context of a country, of a company, and of a family, this causes a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety. In general, and it's been estimated by a study that on an average, just due to anxiety and depression and workforce related issues, there is an economy loss of about $1 trillion globally. That's the context of what we are facing right now. It's interesting, but you might think, hey, but that's not just everything, right? It's not just all doom and gloom. That's true. And you're quite right to say that it's not all doom and gloom. Okay. The first thing that I would like to say is that for all the CXOs out there, you are in an absolutely unique place that none of your predecessors were ever there before. This is the first time that people, CHROs, HR teams, digital teams, CIOs have taken a center stage like never before. This is by far the biggest opportunity that has ever been presented to us. Never before have we able to draw such a direct connection between talent, capability, employee experience, customer experience, digital experience, and overall success of the firm. We've always had to find ways and means to make this connection. But this is the first time in this history that this connection is so apparent and so widely accepted. And this really is a great opportunity because things like this is leading us to become far more digital, far more transformative, and we have become so much more open to things overnight. Let's take the example of remote working. I've worked with leaders in companies before who have, sworn to me that they would never ever operate remotely. It's not possible, Ravi. It's never possible. We will never do this. And suddenly, overnight, all of them have changed their views. So when I go back and ask them, hey, how do you feel about remote working now and openness to people being in a different place or an office? And they've said, yeah, it works. It's proven to us that it works. And so we are happy to do that. This is fantastic because now we have access to huge talent pools that we never had before. We have access to people that can work remotely, part-time, job sharings that were never there before. And this is a huge shift in the future of work and the world of work. And this is amazing. To back it all up, we've got all of these new technologies and connectivity that's coming. 5G, which is right on the cusp. And in some countries, it's already implemented. With 5G coming in and with the increase of connectivity, it's estimated that more than $1 trillion worth of GDP contribution will come from technologies and connectivity. This is fantastic. You can now have people work for you from places which you never imagined before. And they would be able to contribute through their gig workforce, through their projects that we never had before. And this is by far also a great part of this transformation that we're going through. Now, having said all of that, so I've listed out sort of both sides of the equation, as you can imagine on what's happened. And so it's also fair enough to say that economies and countries have reacted differently to this trigger. There are countries which are probably using this opportunity to leapfrog technologies and ways of working. And they would capitalize on things like spaces, on connectivity, on a younger workforce, and better productivity solutions. And there are countries which are also thinking about what they can do. And they're probably not thinking as fast. So this is also a great opportunity for many of us to influence that and be able to be part of this revolution that's happening. So I'm going to stop here just for a second and let you guys think about these two things that I've just spoken about. What does that mean in terms of impact that we are currently facing? And more importantly, what opportunities this is opening up for us? And this now leads me to talk a bit more about what does that mean for all of us. I'm going to do this probably in two different sort of segments. The first segment is I want to talk to business leaders, and these are leaders who are running their own businesses, or they are part of leadership teams, or they are part of excos. They could be CXOs, or they could be business units heads, or people like that. And a little bit more about what does that mean to be part of this sort of change system of changes. And then I'm going to come down into talking to people who are like us, individuals. What does this mean to us, and what can we do to make our life so much easier going forward? So let's first talk a little bit about the business leaders. So if you're a CXO, it's very much possible that you had to immediately rethink the way that you are operating as a business. You probably had to look at your cash positions, you had to look at short-term cash positions, you had to look at burn rates, you had to look at redeploying or rehashing the different sort of cost buckets. I think that's important because that helps you to plan sustainably. One thing which I am finding in speaking with different leaders is that there are two types of sort of reactions to this. A lot of leaders have gone at the first step, which is, okay, let's look at cash, let's look at sustainability, let's look at how can we reduce our burn rate and what can we do to make it more sustainable in the future. That's fantastic. I think it needs to be done. It is basic stuff. And some of them are stopping there. But there is a whole bunch of leaders who are also looking at the same time, while they're reducing their cash burn, they're also looking at investing and experimenting with some new things. And this is what we are calling as pivots. So they are doing some pivots. And the pivots are in few different ways. One is they're looking at technology pivots. What can we do in terms of building new technology platforms? For example, one of the companies that I spoke to recently is a retail company. As you can imagine, if they are a retail organization, all they do is that they run huge shops. And they have a whole lot of workforce that is promoting products in the shops. Now, if you have an extensive lockdown, like in many countries, there is nothing open for months together. So a traditional approach would be the step one is, okay, let's put people on furlough, or let's just take these people out and ask them to come back whenever we have the opportunity to open the shops. Now, the leaders that I spoke to, they were quite innovative. They said, fine, we take all of these guys and we train them overnight, and they will launch their own platforms on Facebook. So they have digital shop fronts now where they are promoting products on Facebook. This is very exciting because now you have such a wide reach than they ever had before. So rather than wait for foot traffic to come in through a mall or a shop front, they have eyeballs on Facebook. This is fantastic. This is what this would call a standard. This is what you would call a pivot. You use the same set of people and ask them to do different things. The other one is focus to unify the employee and customer experience. A lot of times, companies tend to focus on the customer experience. This is what we would like the customer to experience. But they somehow forget that the people who are creating that experience are your own employees. So if you can't bring the same values that you want to derive or you want to showcase to your customers back into your employee experience, then the employees are not able to do that much more effectively. Let's take an example. Let's say flexibility is a value that you want to showcase to your customers. We are flexible, but up to a certain level. Now, if you want your employees to showcase that flexibility or that empathy across the digital channel, if you are not able to do that in the same way as you lead your employees, there is nothing that they are able to anchor it by. So let's say if you wanted to do a lot more empathetic communication, start by behaving more empathetically with your employees. And that way, when they communicate with the customers, they do it in the same way. because that becomes a way of life. And that's how they sort of adapt more quickly. If you want feedback, or if you want feedback to be more relevant to your customers, then make feedback gathering and actioning more relevant to your employee experience. Because then they realize, oh, this is how taking feedback and actioning it works. And so this is how I'm going to make it work with my customers. Right? The third thing which I would like to talk about is the focus on upskilling and reskilling. This is a huge part of the effort. Without being able to focus your employees on learning new things, on learning new ways of doing work, or operating from different places, or learning new technologies, you will not be able to pivot that effectively as a business. So reskilling and really teaching in a very effective way in a short period of time your employees to do different things is going to be a great way to help reskill and upskill your employees. One of the standard go-to behaviors for many of us is to go look for something outside. I think most of the time forget that there is a wealth of talent and there is a wealth of context within your company itself. And so being able to reskill and upskill your people within the company first is a lot more productive than trying to get somebody nice from outside and having to onboard them and get them to learn about the company and things like that. So as much as possible, try and reskill your folks within the company to take on jobs which are slightly more different. And that's a great way to retain talent. That's a great way to show leadership and commitment to your employees. And also to show that you are partaking in their growth as much as they are partaking in the company's business. And it's a great way to build that win-win solution. And the last one is around management styles and leadership styles. And here, I think developing a culture of feedback, a culture of empathy, and a culture of continuous learning and coaching will lead you to a much longer return on the kind of investment that you make now. I think a lot of line managers and a lot of leaders are great at communicating, are great at making things work, but sometimes they miss a beat in terms of being able to coach and mentor. So being able to do that for your own teams in a very effective way can help you bring a lot more value out of your own teams rather than just telling them what to do. And this by far has shown that a coaching environment or a culture of learning can really increase engagement rates with the business. So that's those are the things that I would like to speak to the leaders about. And I would be happy for you to look at this graphic that Anil's going to show you, and then you can sort of anchor some of these points in the way that you are going about your business strategies. Now let's come down to the most important person, and that person is you, the individual, because everything is about you. And that is the reason why you're taking the time to really listen to this channel and the learnings that other of my professional colleagues are sharing with you, and also that you have gotten this far because you want to hear about what can you do as an individual in these interesting times. So let me start by sharing my own personal journey. And I think this helps because that's the first point that I want to make about focus and distraction. And this, I think, is one of the key lessons that I have learned in the last probably 10 months. The first thing is, and it sounds very obvious to you, and it sounded very obvious to me when I first heard it, is the fact that if you focus on something, you will be able to get it done better. That's true. It's not just important to focus on something, but also tremendously important to focus on a few things and not many things. For example, if I were to ask you to list down your most important goals that you wanted to meet, you would probably have a list. And you can rattle off on the top of your head, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. Or you would say, I have one thing. Now, the lesser, the better. Um, I would ideally like that you have 1 or 2 big ticket items that you want to go after rather than a whole host of small things. Because the amount of energy it takes to focus into one thing is significant. And you would have also noticed this is that when you are in a state of flow or in a state of huge concentration, it requires a lot of time to be able to get you there. So now, if you have to do this 8, 10 times over for your 10 goals, you can imagine how much of distraction you have to battle to get there. That's why I personally believe that if you can look at 1 or 2 things, that can really help you really get where you need to get to, right? The one interesting part that I would like to bring to your attention is about your own mindfulness practice. And I think this is an important part of being um, bringing together a peace and focus. I think mindfulness is a very interesting concept. It can come about in a number of different ways. Let me share with you my mindfulness practice of how I do things. So this is what works for my mindfulness practice. My own rhythm is that I'm the best in the morning. So I usually try and look at the big ticket focus items the first thing when I want to get to work, because that's when my flow is the best. The second thing is I try and reduce all distractions. So I take off notifications, turn my phone upside down, put it on mute, and try and really focus on what I need to focus, because that's what helps me to get what I need to get to. Close off all the windows, take off all the notifications, and just focus on one thing that you need to focus on. The third thing, which is about the whole distraction piece that I was talking about, is to really help with my brain waves. And I have used the things of beats. So I use certain beats which I listen to, and those beats help me to calm down and focus my brain waves into what I want to do. And that has found that it's really great. Um, and you would have a different practice. You might use meditation, or you might use yoga, or you might use other mechanisms of mindfulness. It builds a practice that allows you to become more mindful. That's the first thing as an individual, because overall that reduces the anxiety levels, it increases concentration, and also it reduces the amount of adrenaline that's running through your system. And when you reduce the amount of adrenaline that's running through your system, you can go longer in a focused mode. The second thing is about being an intentional learner. And being an intentional learner is about being open to a number of different learning, being curious about what you think is that you want to learn. Now, I want to sort of counter that against my earlier point, which I think is about distraction. Now, some of you might, as you're listening to me, you might think, hey, but you just now said that I need to be focused and I can't be curious and I can't be jumping around. That is so true. And I think the intentional learning bit is focused learning in one topic. And I think that's the piece that's different between just randomly surfing the web or randomly going through social media versus being focused and curious about learning different things related to your particular focus goals. And I think that's about intentional learning, is really about being focused, but at the same time be curious. And that can really help you tune your knowledge base. It can really help you become a much more effective learner with a great mindset. The second thing after focused learning and intentional learning is about being human. Um, this, I think, is one of the most difficult things that I have found to do across a digital medium. And I think this is something that requires a fair bit of mindfulness and attentiveness. For example, a role of individuals has always been very key to how you lead and how you come across to people. Now, It has become even more difficult for us because now we have this constant thing around a Zoom call or a constant thing around being on video, and not being able to meet and form relationships. For example, Anil and I have never actually met in person. But being able to exchange ideas, being able to be open and being listening to what we say to each other and being intentional about the way we do it is really helping us over a period of time form a relationship. It's slower, it needs a lot more practice, but it things that you need to do with your teams, with new clients, with new leaders, with people like candidates that you might be meeting, or with different leaders that you might have never met before, or people that you have never met before. This will slowly result in becoming a lot more human across the digital platform. One of the big differentiators that you would have to other people is the fact that you can bring your humanness across a digital platform. If you are able to do that, if you come across as genuine, as authentic, as somebody that people can connect with and they would like to talk to, then that would become a lot more powerful as a differentiator for you as an individual in this digital space. While most of us talk about being a high tech environment, I think the true differentiator would be how can you be a high touch over a high tech environment. I think if you are able to make that two-step leapfrog in not just embracing the digital technologies, but also being able to bring your humanity about your human centricity out through those digital platforms, you will become far more successful. And the last one is about self care. And this is really about being mindful of who you are, of knowing that you yourself are going through quite a tough transition, just like everybody else. So be more mindful about that, be more self loving about that, be more grateful about what you are going through. And that would help you be a lot less stressed about things. Um, One thing which has I have found very useful in being able to do that is to really build a personal board of advisors. Now, I'll talk to you a little bit about this because I think it was an insight that I never had before while I was much younger. For example, when I was just starting off or when I was in my early careers, I used to always think of um, the leaders that I work with or the managers that I work with as the people that I look up to guide me to become more successful. As I have grown and matured, I have found that there is a very, very great value in bringing together a bunch of people that you rely on, that you trust, that are not just your managers or just your leaders or people in your company, but also people that you can trust and rely on for different things. Think of them as your personal board of advisors. And in this case, you need to have that chemistry with that person to say, this is what I rely on for this individual. For example, there are people that you will come across in your life that would probably put a mirror up to your face so much more easily. They will show you the mirror in the most genuine and empathetic way and ask that you please look at what you're doing because this is how you're coming across. Not everybody can do that to you, but there would be some people that might be able to do that in the most loving and empathetic way to you. And those people are very, very key to you, as one example. The second is there are a bunch of people who will be able to help brainstorm with you. They will come up with ideas with you, ask you to think creatively, force your creativity, think about different things, give you ideas, and those are key too to your growth. And then the third one would be people who would be either within your organizations or outside that could really help you think about how you can grow, how you want your leadership to look like, how you want your legacy to look like, what are you interested in how can you grow to be a better, different person? And I think these sort of people that you have will really help you to become that kind of person that you want to eventually become. So think about, reflect on it, think about the people that you most value and that you would like to have as your personal board of advisors that can help you grow in different areas as a professional and as a leader. And these are the people that you should keep close to you. These are the people that you should continue to converse with. And these are the people that would become very key to your success in the days to come. At the same token, there are people who will come to you and say, hey, I want you to become my board of advisors. I want you to help me with this. Please give your time to them. Because only by working together and only by paying forward can we all become better as a community. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm very grateful to have you as my audience today.